Ukraine has described Russia's latest proposal to create corridors for civilians to escape its bombardments as completely immoral, after it emerged that they would lead to Belarus or Russia itself. A spokesman for President Volodymyr Zelensky said people in cities under Russian attack should be allowed to leave through Ukrainian territory. Well, Ukrainian officials have accused Russia of manipulating those corridors and funneling refugees through hostile territory. The price of oil has risen sharply in response to the continued war, reaching its highest level since 2008. And going back to the refugee situation, Poland says more than 1 million refugees have now entered its territory. Well, let's take a look at a map of Ukraine. The areas in red behind me show those with a strong Russian presence. Well, we can speak now to my colleague Yalda Hakim, who is in Lviv. And Yalda, that's about 70 kilometres, around 44 miles from the border with Poland. Tell us more about the situation there where you are.
Well, Anita, it's 12 days now since this war began, and 12 days of pure horror for the people of Ukraine, especially in the north, the east and the south of the country, where they've experienced intense bombardment and shelling by Russian forces. Overnight, we heard the people of Mariupol, who have attempted for the last few days for a humanitarian corridor to be created so that they could leave the city. They say they continued to come under shelling, and that humanitarian corridor was unable to take place, and evacuations have stopped. There's now another attempt today to create a humanitarian corridor, not just in Mariupol, but in several cities across Ukraine. Here in Lviv, tens of thousands of people continue to arrive with horrific stories. Dan Johnson has the very latest.
This is what war does to people. Frightens them into leaving their homes, forces them to become refugees in their own country and then eventually someone else's. And millions of Ukrainians have now made this potentially deadly dash for safety.
Today, bombing continuing, and I decided to escape because it's really dangerous. No bread, no milk, no eggs, no nothing, and all the chemistry is closed, and it's terrible.
We were in underground, but it was a chance to escape, so we just took our luggage and come here by car.
And last night, Ukraine's president warned his fearful people to expect more and even worse.
Russia
has officially announced that tomorrow there will be shelling of our territory, our factories, our defence complex. Most were built decades ago, even by the Soviet government, built in cities. And now they're in the middle of an ordinary urban environment. Thousands of people work there. Hundreds of thousands live nearby. This is murder, deliberate murder.
Russian aggression isn't going unchallenged. This is thought to be another plane brought down from Ukrainian skies. The Russian invasion has stuttered and stalled, but there's frustration that international words of support and economic sanctions haven't stopped it.
The audacity of the aggressor is a clear signal to the West that sanctions against Russia are not enough, because they didn't understand, did not feel, they did not see that the world is really determined to stop this war. You will not hide from this reality. You will not hide from new murders in Ukraine.
There is a plan for Poland to send Ukraine some of its jets in return for American replacements, but NATO still refuses to impose a no-fly zone, fearful of direct conflict with Russia. So that means people in places like Mariupol suffering more of this. The daily bombardment that is wiping out cities and taking Ukrainian lives. A second planned ceasefire and evacuation wasn't able to go ahead yesterday, so the buses to safety sat empty while the shelling continued.
And we heard the promise that there would be humanitarian corridors. They do not exist. Instead of humanitarian corridors, they can only make them bloody.
In Russia, anti-war protests continue, despite thousands of arrests and the restrictions on reporting about the war. Ordinary Russians are seeing the impact of economic sanctions and Western businesses shutting up shop. But it is Ukrainian families feeling the worst of this. More than 1.5 million have now crossed the border, and many more are coming. The rest shelter underground, where the wartime spirit is strong. Russia's bogged-down invasion may now rely on increased bombing, which would devastate more cities. But Ukrainian resolve will be harder to break. Dan Johnson, BBC News.